So Dana White just announced a bunch of fights for UFC 320 and UFC 321, and besides Yuri Prohaska versus Khalil Rountree Jr., they were pretty much what we expected. And really, I don't see why anybody is getting that hyped over these fights. We saw Chama versus the Dagestani Garden Gnome earlier this year, and it was a snoozer. The Georgian Cardio Goblin versus Shaggy from Scooby-Doo has the potential to be entertaining if Shaggy somehow manages to go Ultra Instinct and catches Marab with a flying knee or a heel hook or something like that. But Marab already has a perfect blueprint on how to shut Corey down by simply copying what Umar Nurmagomedov did. Then there's the fight that we all knew was waiting for us after John ducked his way into disgraceful week-long retirement. Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane. And look, I just saw the opening odds for this fight, and they're what you'd expect. Tom Aspinall is over a -400 favorite, and that's actually kind of a problem for the UFC, because after Tom Aspinall caves in Gane's bald and hollow head, who is going to be left for Tom to fight? A rematch with Alexander Volkov, who Tom has already obliterated in the first round? 40-year-old Derek Lewis fresh off of fraud checking a prospect with one fight in the UFC? Or is it gonna be the Fat Man Strangler, Jailton Almeida, who got put out by Curtis Blades via midriff TKO?
He shoots with his head down, so I used my belly to push down on the back of his head, and he wasn't able to drive up. The body goes where the head goes. I made his head look to the ground. He couldn't drive up to me. I got the hammer fist off.
Yeah, Tom is simply too good for all of these guys. He's beaten all of the athletic heavyweights like Pavlovich and Volkov, and those athletic heavyweights have beaten all of the piggies below them. So, once Tom Aspinall beats Cyril Gane, which is a given by the way since Tom has been training diligently for over a year while Gane has been filming Netflix shows, what is going to be left for Tom? Even though Tom Aspinall has yet to defend the undisputed heavyweight championship, he is already having the same problem that Demetrius Johnson had with his flyweight championship after 8 defenses. Aspinall is so good that he's got no one interesting left to fight. So, how do we give Tom Aspinall matchups that are intriguing and have the potential to improve his legacy? And that's the question I'll be trying to answer today. So, here are my solutions to the Tom Aspinall problem. So, the UFC recently signed 2 new heavyweights, Ante Delija and Marcus Buchecha, who are fighting Marcin Tybura and Martin Buday respectively. Ante Delija, who was a top heavyweight at the PFL, has a win over Renan Ferreira, who is the guy that Ngannou also beat. And then Marcus Buchecha is a former ADCC and IBJJF champion, who was fighting in one championship before he left. He's also in really good shape for a heavyweight, as you can see here from this photo of him. Now, we don't know how these two will actually fare in the UFC until they get into the cage. But if they pass those tests, it's likely going to be one more fight and then a title shot for these two. If these two were to win their fights, I would try giving Delija the loser of Volkov versus Jailton Almeida, and Buchecha the loser of Sergey Pavlovich versus Waldo Cortez Acosta. Then there's Mario Pinto, who is an undefeated heavyweight prospect, and he's fighting Jonta Deniz, which is a pretty good test for him. Although he did get dropped by Austin Lane. However, a fight with more name value than the ones I've already mentioned, that could be made by the UFC in the very near future, is to have Tom Aspinall fight the winner of the rematch between Magomed Ankalaev and Alex Pereira. If it's Alex Pereira. However, I can't say that fight would be that intriguing or exciting, since Tom Aspinall has said this about a possible fight between him and Alex.
Well, the bell would go, and I'd run across, full blast, and rugby tackle him.
So after Aspinall is done with Bum Gamin and maybe Jailton Almeida, those are Aspinall's best options inside of the UFC. So, not that great. Although Buchecha could definitely be intriguing if he's able to get the fight to the ground. Although I do see Tom Aspinall just sleeping him in the first round on the feet. But then, what about outside of the UFC? Alright, so the first answer that you guys are probably already spamming in the comments before watching this video is, yo, just bring Ngannou back from the PFL. And yes, that would absolutely be the #1 option if it were possible. Francis has the lineal heavyweight championship that goes all the way back to the first UFC events. And he is also the last active heavyweight with wins over legends like Cain Velasquez and Stipe Miocic. But while the Predator, not that Predator, that Predator, has reportedly expressed some interest in coming back to the UFC, there's 3 factors that will likely prevent his return. First, there's the fact that Ngannou still has 1 to 2 fights left with the PFL, and since each of these fights requires the PFL to pay him $10 million and pay Ngannou's opponent $2 million, each Ngannou fight would be as catastrophic to the PFL's finances as the release of the Epstein files would be to the Trump administration, since the PFL reportedly only sold 10,000 pay-per-views for Ngannou's fight with Renan Ferreira. Then, the second factor is age. Ngannou is not a young man, and he's gone through a lot of wear and tear throughout his career. I mean, in his fight with Ciryl Gane, he fought without ligaments in his knees. We were calling Stipe an old man when he fought John Jones at the age of 42, and Ngannou is just 3 years younger than that. Then, there's the third factor, which is the ego of Dana White. Now, for most other matters in the UFC, I would tell you that Dana White doesn't matter nowadays. He's obviously busy with more important things than the UFC, such as promoting Canelo vs. Crawford and Power Slap. But when it comes to the Ngannou situation, that's what gets his blood boiling. Dana White, having grown up watching heavyweight boxing legends like Mike Tyson and Lennox Lewis, has a soft spot for the big guys. And that is why Dana is so adamant about keeping Ngannou away from the UFC. He just can't stand the fact that Ngannou carved his own path. And remember, he didn't put the belt around Ngannou's waist after Francis beat Bum Gamin. So, assuming that Francis is out of the picture, who is left for Aspinall to fight outside of the UFC? Well, a possible matchup for him would be the winner of Rug vs. Anatoly Malikin 2, which is happening at One Championship in November. And in this case, what I would do if I were the UFC would be to bring in the winner for an immediate title shot against Aspinall, similar to how they did with Pantoja vs. Kai Asakura, so as to ensure that they don't risk losing to a lower ranked contender, which could dramatically reduce their name value. But, sadly for these two guys, they're likely in contract hell thanks to Charity Sityodtong, as they haven't been given a fight for over a year because one can't afford to pay their MMA talent.
If you think of signing with One Championship, don't. It's that simple. You should not.
But anyways, here are the other options. The UFC should definitely try to sign Renan Ferreira, who lost brutally to Ngannou, but still is a huge and athletic guy with knockout power. Another option could be the winner of the RIZIN Heavyweight Grand Prix, who is scheduled to fight Ryan Bader on New Year's Eve. And of course, if Ryan Bader wins, this option would be a no-go. But remember, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel as it is. The reigning KSW champion, Phil DeFries, is a no-go because he and Tom Aspinall are training partners, and Tom has said that since he has let DeFries enter his home in the past, they will never fight each other. One interesting option would be Will Fleury, the current Octagon heavyweight champion, who is Irish and might be able to sell the fight based on the England versus Ireland rivalry. And then, the final good option outside of the UFC right now would be Stuart Austin, who finished Tom Aspinall with a heel hook very early on into Tom Aspinall's career. Now of course, Austin doesn't have the cleanest record. I mean, he was out there in the regional scene getting flying kneed by Johnny Walker of all people. But he still has a win over Tom Aspinall, even though the referee probably should have stopped the fight earlier because Tom was beating up Austin badly, and Austin got the heel hook because Tom gassed out. But it is still a less fluky win than the win that Marlon Vera had over Sean O'Malley, or the win that Curtis Blades had over Tom Aspinall. And Stuart Austin is still 35 years old and is currently on a 4-fight win streak. So if the UFC were to sign Stuart Austin, give him one fight against someone like Marcin Tybura or Sergey Spivak, and then give him a shot against Tom, so that Tom could avenge the only legit loss on his record, that would be one of the few ways that the UFC could improve Tom Aspinall's legacy as a champion. But still, even with stuff like national rivalries and avenging past losses on the line, I don't know if it would be guaranteed to generate hype for an Aspinall fight, which is why I think the UFC should try an idea from the past. A season of The Ultimate Fighter where the UFC would gather heavyweight champions from around the world, then have the winner of the tournament fight Tom Aspinall. Back in 2016, when the UFC did this for the flyweight division, it resulted in one of the best seasons of The Ultimate Fighter there's ever been. But you might say now, but The Ultimate Fighter sucks nowadays. The best season they've had in years is the one between DC and Chael, and even that's mid. And you'd be correct in saying that, because The Ultimate Fighter as it is now is pretty awful. But what about this idea? Instead of doing an over-edited reality TV show like the UFC is doing right now, what about making it so that The Ultimate Fighter is a live stream that is broadcasted either on UFC Fight Pass or the UFC's YouTube channel, with viewers having the ability to interact with fighters by sending them super chats. And of course, we would be watching the actual fights in real time too. By modernizing the TUF format from reality TV to live streaming, the UFC could save money on video editing costs and make more money through super chats. Plus, if the UFC could do this with heavyweights, they could let them have all of the booze they want since they don't have to cut weight. And even if it ends up failing horrendously, just the novelty of it will help to boost the profile of Tom Aspinall's challenger. But anyways, those are all of my ideas on how to get Tom Aspinall a new, interesting opponent to fight after he starts as the man who robbed Volkov. So yes, like, sub, and share. Goodbye.